Avengers! Assemble.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Excelsior, a Marvel's Avengers podcast, the world's #1 podcast dedicated to Square Enix's Crystal Dynamics' Marvel's Avengers. I'm your director, Christian Buckley, joined by the Apex legend himself, Jack Martin.
Excelsior. Good to be here, Christian.
Yeah, good to have you back. We had an off week. We did it. It was a nice, comfortable episode, though.
Yeah.
Just ran through some comics, and you had a chance to read the comics since then, right?
I did. I finally finished last night with Black Widow, and I enjoyed them. They're all like pretty easy, quick reads. They were, I think, around 24 pages each, and yeah, they were good little like insight into the world that this game was taking place in, and like what happened slightly before. So yeah, I think they were good little introduction pieces to the characters and some of the dynamics in the team.
For sure, yeah. I think they worked more as just like a Cliff Notes introductory sort of thing than anything else, because as somebody who's beaten the campaign, it was just a good, like, checking the pulse of like this take on Marvel. You know, I think that's what it was able to do for me. But like I said, I've beaten the game. You're a few hours in. So what we're going to do today in this episode of Excelsior, we are going to run through the war table information that was announced earlier this week in Fury's report in the later part of the show. But we're just going to establish this with impressions, you know. We're the world's #1 Avengers podcast. We have a responsibility to, I believe, give honest impressions of the game. We're not going to get into spoilers really, outside of the opening hour. A lot of the early game is similar to the story found in the beta, so beyond that, we're really not going to really go into much detail at all about spoilers. So if you're worried about that, don't be. So Jack, where are you in the game roughly? Like, can you describe your playtime and where you are in relation to the beta?
Yeah, so in relation to the beta, I am in the mission in, I think it's called Snowy Tundra, where you're with the Hulk and Kamala. I'm playing as Kamala. And you're tasked by Maria Hill to go to this like base in the Snowy Tundra. That's where I'm at. That was in the beta, so I'm basically where the beta left off.
Right, yeah, I think that was the final mission in the beta before you unlocked multiplayer.
Right.
But what surprised many people, and I think it surprised you too, is just the game kicks off. There's a lot of content that story-wise takes place to set up this entire game that was not present in the beta at all.
Yeah, that I think is what has surprised me most, coupled with some early impressions from journalists and people who've gotten their hands on it this past week, where everyone's been saying they've been pleasantly surprised with the quality of the game, and I would have to say with the quality of the campaign, let's say, the story. And I'm one of those people. I was tearing up for the first, 10 minutes of the game, and they just really nail the introduction to this world, and I think they do it so well because it's through the lens of Kamala, who is, a great vehicle for basically fandom of people of Marvel fans, essentially. You and I, hosted Excelsior last year, which is dedicated to the MCU and basically love for Marvel in general. And I think Kamala is a good way of showing that, of showing the excitement for Marvel and characters, and the backstory and lore. And I think it respects that too, even within the framing of A-Day itself. And I think I think is incredible. And I was very surprised by that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And having seen the campaign through and seeing the role Kamala has in this game, it is essentially her story. And I love that about it. By the end of the game, again, no spoilers, but I was rooting for her so hard. Everything you're saying about her being an analog for the audience in a way, or just introducing the world of Marvel as a fan of Marvel, but also as a fan of the Avengers, just sort of replicating that experience going in. I think that was an excellent idea, especially after we just spent 10 years, more than 10 years, with like a well-known mainstream take on these characters, right? Like we have that baggage coming into this game, regardless of whether you like that or not, right? But I think doing it through the eyes of Kamala really makes the unique things about these takes on the characters stand out and the world as a whole, right? Because outside of Kamala, there's not much the game does to paint the image or perception of the Avengers from the general public, from like aside from an occasional talking head on a news station or just the fact that we open with an Avengers celebration with A-Day. But why don't we talk a little bit about A-Day?
Mm-hmm.
You kick off the game, you are playing as, what, like 12-year-old Kamala maybe? Like you're a young preteen Kamala Khan who was invited to A-Day because she wrote some killer fan fiction about the Avengers for a contest. And what you have to do is you're introduced into this convention almost that's just celebrating the Avengers, and there's so much history everywhere in this convention hall. There's like a show your strength thing with Mjolnir and Hulk hands. Like there's so many fun little things in there that just feels so authentic, and viewing it from the eyes of a child, I think was a great call.
It
So
reminded
what did
me.
you think of diving in there?
Yeah, it reminded me of parts of a game like The Last of Us, where you like
Yeah.
explore the environment, and I wasn't really anticipating that from this game. Granted, this is more stilted and it's more you're sort of forced to do that, whereas in The Last of Us, in games like that, it's more organic and you can choose to do that or not. But I think it still hits because even though you are kind of being dragged through it and being forced to engage with the environment, and it's not optional, it's still leading you along the way, and it's giving you all those like it really is pulling on your heartstrings and your emotion as a Marvel fan. And I said earlier I was tearing up at various parts through this because you see Kamala interact with certain characters that I didn't anticipate being there. And her interactions with them is just so genuine, and she is geeking out at the same time, but also like remaining true to her character. And we learn a lot about her within those first, 10 to 15 minutes. And yeah, I feel like she's so new to me, and I feel like to a lot of people. And to have her in that spotlight, I think is it works so well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think that hopefully what this game I think has done for Kamala is going to reflect sort of what Spider-Verse did for Miles in terms of just elevating a new generation of Marvel hero that can resonate with so many more people now. Just is so refreshing. Like, yeah, I love the Avengers. I love Thor. I love Cap. I love Tony. I love everybody on that team. But, like, I think, again, with that baggage of an MCU going into this, that so many people compared it to originally, having it be so centered on Kamala, she really is the heart of the whole campaign. I think that's what makes it so special and so unique and not feel stale or not have me sitting there the whole time comparing it to like the Robert Downey Jr. take versus the Nolan North take, right? Like I'm viewing it from Kamala's eyes of her meeting her heroes, so it's less about me going in with the Marvel history I know, not just the MCU even, but one thing I'll say for sure that I really appreciate is visually in terms of like some animation or on an audio level with sound effects, I think they did a really smart thing with maintaining certain iconic things from the MCU. Like, just visually how we've interpreted elements of these specific characters, I think translate well to a game where if you did it differently, it would definitely feel weird, but there's only maybe one or two times through the whole story where something happened and then I immediately was like, oh, MCU.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of nods like that, just because the general audience now knows Marvel because of the MCU. Even if they had like prior knowledge and familiarity with it, like you can't get that out of your brain. So I can definitely see this being some way influenced by the MCU, despite it being its own take.
Yeah. So for you, how many hours do you think you have put in so far?
I would say it's hard. I'm really bad at this. I would say probably 3, maybe somewhere
Okay.
around there. Maybe more, maybe
Mm-hmm.
less. I'm always awful at guessing how much time I played in the game, but I would say around there.
Sure. I forgot to mention this. I've been playing it since Monday at midnight, so that's why I beat the game. I didn't just binge it all from Thursday to when we're recording on Friday right now.
Right, you got the super
Um,
deluxe version where you could play a week early, or however many
yeah,
days
well,
early.
like 3 days early,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think my total, again, they don't have a in-game clock, but if I had to guess based on the time I spent streaming the game for those hours versus the like maybe 3 total hours I played off stream for the main campaign, I want to say it took me from around like 16 to 18 hours.
Okay.
And I really didn't do many side quests throughout the main campaign. Like, they'll introduce these iconic quests to you where it's like, hey, this is the Hulk iconic quest, where if you do this, you get a Hulk costume, and it's just a multiple uh, side quest arc about the Hulk, and each Avenger has one of those. I didn't mess with that yet. The only side stuff I've done is, as the heroes were introduced to the team, you unlock a harm room specifically designed for them. So, like, to test their abilities, their skills. So I was doing that in addition to the main campaign missions, just to sort of know what I was getting myself into when I picked up characters who I didn't play a ton in the beta. So yeah, I think I'll also little asterisk. I like took my time like going through a lot of these environments. So I think if somebody was just going objective to objective, I think 15 hours is pretty reasonable for completing the campaign. And as someone again who's finished it, I think it's completely worth it for that experience. I think the story here is at least as good as Spider-Man PS4. I thought this wasn't as predictable as Spider-Man on the PS4, so that might give it an edge, but I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it seems unique. Granted, I'm only 3 hours into it, so that my opinion could change. So, listeners, Christian has his, complete view of the game. I don't, so that might change by then. But so far, I think the story is the highlight for me. I like the combat. I think it's fun. I think it's very rinse, wash, repeat. But despite that, I do think it is enjoyable. I don't think it's super in-depth like, say, God of War is. And I compare it because I think the combat director, or I don't know his title, I'm going to say combat director, is from God of War.
Yeah, 2018 God of War, same person worked on both games.
Yeah. So that's the comparison there. And a lot of the skill tree stuff and just the way you kind of control your characters is somewhat similar to how you control Kratos. I think it's fun, not super in depth, but it's enjoyable.
Yeah, I'll add that I found as the game goes on, I've probably put about 3 to 4 hours in just with the Avengers Initiative, which is the multiplayer mode, as Thor, and I found that the more I play, the more it opens up, the more combos become more of a focus. And earlier today, I saw a tweet from, I believe, Gene Park on Twitter that had just like a short video clip of Captain America in a harm room, and my God, the level of complexity in the combo I saw was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I do think as time goes on, if you level the skill trees and get in more of the nitty gritty on your stats, you're going to be able to really go in on combos, making combat look flashy and feel diverse. Because, yeah, early hours, it was a lot of just like square, square, triangle, square. But now it's a lot more of me, specifically with Thor, managing Mjolnir, doing combos, going up in the air, juggling people. Like, there's a lot you can get into as you progress through the skill trees I found.
Right, yeah, and I'm super early too, so I think that plays into it a lot. Even in the beta, that's kind of how I felt. But yeah, it does seem
Hmm.
like the skill trees are a lot. Like there's three big skill trees, so I imagine
Yeah.
that will open up then. I
Hmm.
also found so I have some negatives to this game. Obviously, it's not a perfect game. Um,
Hmm.
I'll see where I land on it. Like once I beat it and once I'm playing the multiplayer bunch, I feel like that won't be for a few weeks really to just kind of sit with it since it's that kind of a game.
Yeah.
So far, I know I've only played a little bit of it, but I think the level design is kind of boring. To me, it feels like you're just following a corridor,
Hmm.
and I know like most linear games are like that, where you just essentially just follow the straight and narrow path. But games like
Hmm.
Uncharted and some other games like that don't make it feel that way because the environments are bigger, even though you are definitely following a straight path. There's more dynamic things happening, but I think part of it is because you're playing as these heroes with such like a lot of mobility to them, and it feels somewhat confined certain areas. Obviously, I'm playing
Hmm.
the tundra area right now, which is big and massive.
Hmm.
But before that, it was I don't know. It just felt like I was just going down uninteresting levels.
Yeah, I think from memory, I agree with what you're saying. I thought Jersey City was okay, like the Hero Park area. I thought that was fine. That kind of surprised me, honestly. I wasn't expecting like a suburb area at all,
Mm-hmm.
or like a city block, I guess in that case. But I think when it comes to the single player stuff, I definitely felt more, again, level design wise, more single player than I was expecting after the beta, because I was expecting the single player campaign to mostly be in these areas that we were playing over and over in the beta, and that was my biggest worry. But again, starting with the campaign, I found it feeling a lot more like a single player experience, like Tomb Raider or Uncharted, in terms of the way it's presented, than I was expecting. Which, yeah, I don't think they do anything out the gate super wild when it comes to. I don't know if it's level design because I think what you said was is right about it's the same sort of hallway type deal that you're getting with Uncharted, but I guess maybe like art design or environment design.
Yeah, that I think that plays into it because overall, I mean, everyone's been saying this since this game was announced, but I think it still holds true that I just don't think it's aesthetically impressive, or even like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just fine looking. I really feel like this looks like a the transitional game from PS3 to PS4. Like that's kind of where I land on it, and it just it strikes me as old looking. Which
Mm-hmm.
it I mean it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad looking game, and even if it doesn't look that great, it doesn't really take away from my experience that much. But
Mm-hmm.
still, it's weird to see a game with this much time put into it and with a name like Marvel's Avengers not look like the game that it should look like. Not look like the premier tail end game leading in from PS4 to PS5. It looks like a generation slightly. It almost looks like a generation behind, which caught me off guard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but again, I don't think that's a massive negative. It is totally noticeable though.
Mm-hmm. Worth adding, I'm playing on PlayStation 4 Pro. I never really felt that way. Like I don't think it looks on the par of like a Sony first party game or anything like that, but I think it looks better than some other third party stuff we've seen even last year personally. But I did see there was a Digital Foundry report that said its design, its textures, everything like that is optimized to just be significantly better on next gen.
Mm.
So I think honestly what this game might be is a game that was designed for next gen, realized they'd have an advantage if they got it out on current gen, and then downscaled visually so they could get it out on this gen. I think that's probably why the visuals look this weird way of like it looks like fine, but like it looks good at times, and then sometimes it looks like just weirdly out of date
Yeah.
or like a 2018 game. Like it's a weird mix for sure, but like you said, it didn't really bother me ever.
Yeah, and despite it looking like not that great, I don't particularly like the look of the game. I think it runs
Mhm.
well, and I'm running on a base PS4.
Mhm.
Haven't encountered anything noticeably laggy or chuggy. I think frames are pretty good so far, but
Mhm.
also I haven't been playing multiplayer, so I can't speak to that, and I'm sure that plays a lot into it. And I know you have the option of playing on performance mode, which I don't have. So I
Right.
don't have like that sort of the luxury of like seeing what this would look like on like 4K mode versus like optimized for performance.
Yeah. I can back you up there. Like again, I am on performance mode, but there's only two standout examples in my head I can think of where I got dips.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, felt much smoother than the beta. And just to quickly touch on multiplayer, because I haven't spent again more than like 3 or 4 hours in multiplayer. Remember how we were just so surprised at how short some of those drop zones were?
Yeah.
That's not how it works here.
How's it different?
Like, so far, unless I've just been playing the wrong thing, which I don't think I have, because it's still the same bronze emblem that those drop zones were. When I queue up into a drop zone, they spawn me in the big open area. So like if I do you remember the one where we took out the arc reactor?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of queuing up immediately in the aim facility and just working through the aim facility, they queue me up into the world that the aim facility is in. So I have to travel there, get into there, hack something to access the elevator, go down the elevator, then continue. So it's like each one, instead of taking like 3 minutes, takes like 8 maybe. So like it's more of a substantial experience for the drop in drop out missions than I think the beta represented.
Do you like that? Because it seems like those missions could have been an opportunity to be like you're short on time and be like, oh, I have, a few minutes to just drop in and do this. It seems like they added a little bit more time. Do you like that experience versus the beta?
I think both are fine. If the option was available for both, I'd be happy with that. Like if they eventually maybe make a playlist where I can just queue up into the short beta versions of them and just do as many as I can before I have to go.
Mm-hmm.
I would like that, but yeah, I think it's fine the way it is. And none of them have spent more than like 10 minutes doing it, so it's not that bad.
Yeah.
If I had to slap a score on the campaign, because again, it's hard to really review the living aspect of a game with a definitive number. I feel like I'd give it an 8.5.
That's pretty good.
For the
That's quite
yeah
generous. Again, I haven't
yeah
seen it, but yeah, that sounds quite promising.
yeah. I think the campaign is worth playing for any Marvel fan, and specifically for the people that saw the reveal and then they got like the wind sucked out of them of like, oh man, I wish it was just a single player Avengers game. That's still here. Like I genuinely think they made a single player Avengers game, and then they took those bones, and then they made a Destiny multiplayer game out of it. Like both experiences feel different enough to me in terms of presentation that you can get in, play the whole campaign solo, enjoy the campaign, and then be done with it.
Right. I'm really interested to see the final verdict from reviewers. Obviously, that doesn't matter to your personal enjoyment of it, but we were talking about this before its release, where for the past like year and a half, this game has kind of been the industry's punching bag, similar to No Man's Sky or Battlefront 2, which both occupied those when they were released to various reasons.
Right.
And you and I were saying like this, we didn't really think this deserved it all that much. There wasn't any egregious microtransaction stuff. If you think that, go to Christian's video he made recently about sort of the misconceptions about the microtransactions in this game, because they're really not egregious. But yeah, like I think a lot of it was the quality of the visuals, and people were upset because they didn't get the single player experience, like what you're saying, or like the focus wasn't fully there. It was kind of split between single player and multiplayer, but this past week we've seen like a lot of positivity on this game that I didn't expect. I thought that negativity would have continued through launch, but it seems to be that people have definitely turned on this game, and it's interesting and it's good because, of course, you want to have a positive experience, especially when it comes to something like Marvel, right? So it's been really nice to see, and I've also had that 180 because I wasn't so sold on this game until maybe even a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, you brought up critics, so why don't we dive into Fury's report for the week? Of course, we're going to go over the latest information about the game, Community Pulse. Currently, on OpenCritic, it's at a 74 right now.
That sounds exactly like where we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I think, yes, that's probably what we expected. Like I said, when I gave it an 8.5, that's strictly based on the campaign. But I think, again, because I like Destiny and games like Destiny, I don't think the score would dip that much based on the multiplayer experience for me. But yeah, 74 seems about right. And I have a question for you. Do you think the 74 is going to help or hurt the people that were on the edge?
No, because I feel like a lot of people look at a 70 or a 7 out of 10. I know obviously this is different because Metacritic and OpenCritic tends to be lower than like the average review, I'd say.
Yeah.
But people will look to that and be like, I don't want to spend $60 on a 7, right? And I totally understand that because a lot of people look to 9s, a lot of people look to 9.5s and 10s, obviously, to be like, okay, sweet, I'm sold now. Because I know probably I'll be getting this excellent experience. I'm not sure they'll be getting an excellent experience with Avengers. It is, I think it'll be good. Again, I'm speaking for 3 hours in, so I can't really speak to the overall quality. But yeah, I feel like this probably won't sell people. But then again, this game's going to make millions of dollars anyway, so I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the reason I ask you that is because we also had a news story this week that the beta for Marvel's Avengers is the most downloaded and most played beta in PS4 history.
Yeah, I mean that just goes to show you what what the sales will look like for this game. It's going to be nuts.
Yeah, like I think it's not outrageous to say that it's probably going to sell at least as good as Spider-Man did. Because you also have to take into consideration it's on more than just the PS4.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the Avengers name, right? Like, Spider-Man's a huge name, obviously, but this is the highest grossing film franchise of all time, right? And again, you're talking mainstream. You're talking to people that maybe only buy a couple games a year. They see this. This is, I think, a great game for that player. Like, I think it's the great game you can hop in, do your dailies, do your weeklies, play with your friends, enjoy a very, I think, excellently delivered Avengers story in a good game.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like what you're saying, I think it just nails it. Maybe not nails it, but it hits on all fronts, right? Like, if you want your single player game, it's there. But if you want to play with your buddies and just mess around as cool Marvel characters, that's also there too. And that, I think, is a huge draw. Like what you're saying, Spider-Man sold incredibly well, and it was just exclusive. And this game is on, all platforms or most platforms. So that's just gonna sell bonkers. And I'm excited to see where that will place because obviously Animal Crossing this year is far and away, I believe, still the number one game this year sales wise. Obviously, Call of Duty is gonna be thrown in the mix in some later games this year, but I would imagine this is top 3.
Yeah, I think top 3 is safe to say, especially, there's been controversies about FIFA and the COD pricing structure this year, so I think if there's any year with a chance, it's this one.
Yeah.
But a lot of this game is going to live and die by its post-game support. Obviously, it's being framed as being referred to as the Avengers Initiative, which I have now accessed. It's available for you to dive into straight out of the gate from the main menu. The game highly recommends you don't do that because there are a lot of spoilers in the Avengers Initiative. Because, Jack, let me tell you, there are still story missions that you can get in the Avengers Initiative that are framing the new Marvel universe that we're going to be with for the next few years.
Right.
And as someone who beat the game, play the campaign first. Just play through the campaign before you queue up multiplayer. You're not going to lose anything by doing that. Like, just experience the story and then follow up with it. Because the thing is, it's like the Avengers Initiative is basically the post-credit scene, right? Except blown up to be a bunch of missions.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good rule of thumb with any game. I know a lot of my friends who will exclusively play Call of Duty multiplayer and never touch the campaigns, and I always go through the campaign first before even touching multiplayer.
That's interesting. I did not. I usually do that, but I didn't with World War II. So, but speaking of the Avengers Initiative, earlier this week we got one final War Table pre-launch for the $60 purchases. Now this was day one for the early access ones.
The privileged
we got a
folks
War
out there.
Table, War Table 3 that went over a decent amount of new content. Would have been more content, but at the start of the presentation, Crystal Dynamics mentioned in a splash screen that the presentation was altered because of the events that happened the prior weekend due to the unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman, who obviously is a Marvel icon. He's an icon of culture, honestly, beyond Marvel. And it was heavily implied by the way this was framed, by the way they said, hey, we had to change things, that at War Table 3, they were going to announce and reveal Black Panther in the game.
Yeah, they, along with like the text on screen saying, hey, we changed some stuff due to, recent events, there was a logo of Black Panther that was unique to this game. So yeah, I think that was basically them saying it without saying it. Like, we would have seen Black Panther or Wakanda or a combination of the two in this War Table, but obviously the timing was just all wrong there. It was just not appropriate to announce something featuring Black Panther, after the events of the weekend. So I think it was. We'll get that soon. Obviously, it's just obviously was not the right time.
Yeah, and based on reports and some hush-hush information people have been spreading around, Black Panther was kind of a lock and a given, and Wakanda being added to the War Table in terms of a place you can go to and run missions at, or specifically maybe some high-level missions at, it's coming, right? Like, it's still coming, and this was the right call as far as I'm concerned. I think they did the right thing.
Yeah, like, the announcement maybe is pushed, but I don't think the release date of that content is pushed.
Yeah, and if it is, it's not by much, I don't think.
Yeah, and we've already seen that they're planning for a lot of content after this, so it's not like we're going to be dry for content.
Yeah, because we do know we're going to be getting operations. So every character that is coming to Marvel's Avengers post-launch for free is adding an operation, which is a multi-stage quest unique to them, which adds a villain, new locations, obviously a new character to play as, and their unique skill trees. We actually have confirmation now that the first hero coming to the game is coming in October, and it is Kate Bishop Hawkeye.
They got us.
They did.
Honestly, I think I'm kind of more excited for Kate Bishop than I am for Clint.
Me too, because the thing is, like, they're leaning into the Matt Fraction run, and the Matt Fraction take on Clint Barton I like a lot, but I don't want to compare to the MCU, but I still got a milquetoast taste in my mouth from Jeremy Renner's take.
Yeah. We both read that. I don't think we read it for the initial run of Excelsior last year. I don't think we ever did like a video on it. But we both read it and we both really enjoyed it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Kate Bishop was definitely the highlight of that particular run.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Kate is a great character, and I'm glad she's being added to the game. I've been maining Thor, and I think I will up until October when Kate gets added to the game. If we want to talk about voice cast quickly, we know that Ashley Birch, who voiced Aloy in Horizon Zero Dawn,
Yep.
as well as Chloe Price in Life is Strange, is joining the Marvel Universe to play Kate Bishop. And the trailer wasn't very long, but the vibes were there, you know?
Oh, for sure.
So Kate is being added to the game in October, and we learned that via a press release. And at the same time, due to insiders and reporting along the lines of the Avengers initiative, we know that Clint is being added in November. Crystal Dynamics in the presentation sort of pitched their each individual operations as a double feature. Like they're very intrinsically tied to one another, obviously because of who they're both Hawkeye and the story they're telling amongst these two characters. So getting a character in October and November, what we learned about Black Panther, potentially the fact that a raid is coming with Black Panther, I don't think it's out of the question to expect Black Panther in like December.
It sounds like we might be getting a new hero every month just to keep the game going. I don't maybe I don't want to like set expectations like that, but it seems that way because like for a game that is focused on post-game launch, more so than I'd say even launch, because I feel like their plans are very ambitious for this game. I think it's reasonable to suspect that we'll be getting a significant addition every month. Maybe that is in the form of a character or some sort of mission or something. But
Right.
yeah, I think that's entirely possible.
Yeah, I think there's also a scenario where the way they've been pitching it as like a double feature, it makes it exclusive to this, where it is a back-to-back release for October, November. But if this is the exception, I don't know why you would lead with that, you know?
Right.
So we can look forward to Kate. If they treat her story and Clint's story with a tenth of the TLC they put into Kamala's for the main campaign, I am stoked. But we also learned, Jack, you just brought up their missions and stuff like that. We learned a little more about the higher level content that you need your friends to play with. Or you can still play solo, but you're better off if you have your friends. Your chances are better.
Yeah.
Two things specifically. First up, villain sectors. This is coming from Marvel.com. Villain sectors are special missions that provide epic showdowns with powerful bosses that players will want to return to as their heroes get closer to the game's power level cap of 150. While shield vaults are treasure troves of resources, gear, and secrets that must be discovered and unlocked. Players looking to test their mettle will look forward to teaming up with up to 3 friends to tackle AIM's Secret Lab, a mission only accessible after reaching the game's highest power level of 150, available once a week. The AIM Secret Lab raid will culminate in a massive boss fight influenced by how well players' teams performed throughout the mission.
So we're really getting the looter shooter stuff with this kind of edition.
Oh yeah, and right now I think my Thor's at like power level 38, so I have a ways to go. Like I don't think I'll be ready for this for at least like 2 more weeks.
Yeah.
But we do have a raid. It's interesting in this breakdown, they do a lowercase r raid, so I don't know if it's the raid, right? Like the presentation again was a little middling on how it set expectations of what it is.
Yeah.
It sounded like it was a raid, but
yeah, kind of. I'm not super familiar with like I played Destiny 1, but other than that, I'm not super familiar with this type of genre where raids are super important. I think I played the one on Mars. Do you remember that in the first Destiny? It was like the very first one, probably.
I think Vault of Glass was one of the early ones.
Yeah, that might have been it. But yeah, I remember it being super difficult. But yeah, now that we'll most likely have a party to go up and do that with. It's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I'll ask you this: Do you have a main in mind for the raids?
So, in the beta was Iron Man, and I love me some Iron Man. I liked playing Thor in A-Day. I felt it seemed much better than the beta version. I don't know if that was just me, but I really enjoyed that.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking right now, definitely Iron Man, and then I like Kamala too. So maybe have her as a backup, and I'm liking Hulk too. So that's a
Nice.
little trifecta there.
Yeah, I can say this confidently. They made every hero fun to play. Like,
Cool.
all of them are fun.
Mm-hmm.
We have one more multiplayer Avengers Initiative mission type that was detailed during this presentation, and this one was completely new. Like, we expected a raid, but we didn't expect this. Mega Hives. Now, Mega Hives, what these do are they put your full superhero roster to the test as your heroes fight their way through a gauntlet of descending floors packed with enemies. The farther down they go, the higher the difficulty goes up. And once all of the heroes are defeated, players will have to start over from the very beginning. So basically, it's a gauntlet where all 6 of your heroes are being used. If one of them goes down, you switch control to the next one until it's like your last hero falls, then you have to reset. So I think this is such a cool challenge, right? Because I don't know if it's like endless floors. I don't know if it's like however many floors it is. But the idea of having to have a roster of heroes that are they can stand on their own, and then just seeing how far you can get with how you built your team, I think is really fun and is going to incentivize coming back.
Yeah, but at the same time, for me, I think it represents a missed opportunity because
Mm-hmm.
the main mechanic here is once your hero goes down, you switch to another hero. I really
Mm-hmm.
wish they implemented that by like you can manually switch to certain characters. Like right now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the Tundra mission, and I wish I could just manually switch like GTA style to Hulk versus Kamala, because I
Yeah.
think that would have been a really fun and dynamic way to play the game. Like you don't have to choose a certain character; you can just have a party that you can switch in between at certain points. I think that would have made the game a lot more interesting. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't think that's out of the question to be something that's added down the line for single player content, maybe. I don't know how that would be worked in with the multiplayer side. But for comparison, again, another Square Enix game, Final Fantasy VII Remake allows you to do that mid combat. You can just swap between party members.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I think something like that would be welcome. There's a few other small things that I would like them to add to the game that I think are realistic, like raising the height that you can fly up with the character just by like another 10 feet would be nice.
Dude, I ran into that in A Day again with Iron Man. I floated for
Mhm.
a hot second, like just literally 1 second, and it was like, oh, lower yourself. You've gone
Yeah,
too
dude.
high. And I was like, oof.
Hmm.
Maybe don't even let me
So,
float at that part because it was just
yeah.
too much.
Yeah. But overall, I think this war table was solid. I think obviously they didn't show everything they initially planned, so I think whenever we get the next war table, then we will have a little more insight into the future content past launch window. But yeah, overall, I'm feeling good about launch. I feel good about diving into this multiplayer content a little more this weekend and in the future with you. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it seems from what people have been saying that it's more packed than games like this usually launch at. Like games
Oh
like
yeah.
Destiny or The Division or stuff like that often launch and it's pretty bare bones. And
Hmm.
then it isn't until, I'll even say Star Wars Battlefront 2. When
Yeah.
that launched, of course, it had a lot of issues in 2017. Chief among them, I think, was content. Obviously, they had some microtransaction stuff, but I'm talking about content. Um, and then it wasn't until 2020 that when the game like finally completed, that the game was
Hmm.
just this is a great like Star Wars toy chest essentially, and that's where
Yeah.
that game really shined. And reviewers went back to review that game and gave it new scores. Like IGN did that, and you almost never see that because it's just a totally different game than it was years ago. But it seems like this is off to a really good start, and that's what's exciting for me.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's in a really good spot. From what I've seen for its offerings of content, it's definitely not starved. So,
Hmm.
but Jack, I think that's going to conclude episode 3 of Excelsior. We covered all we had to cover for this week. Next week, we're probably going to dip a little more into spoiler territory for the story. I don't know if you watched the last episode, but I came up with the idea for like people to write in for anything like that. Agents of Excelsior.
I did hear that.
Do we like that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Well, if you want to be an agent of Excelsior, you can leave a comment on this video. Let us know what you think of the beta so far. Let us know, or sorry, not the beta. Let us know what you think of the full game release so far. If you picked it up after playing the beta, what you're thinking of it, who your main is going to be. Let us know. Any comments or concerns if you want us to address them next week. We have a tier for that on our Patreon. Patreon.com/joyclicks is where you can go for at the $2 tier to have involvement and interaction heavily with all of our shows, including this one right here. But if you're listening to this show auditorily, is that the right word?
Sure.
Is that
or
auditorily? Yeah. You may be on Apple Podcast or Spotify, where, like I said, we are the #1 Marvel's Avengers video game podcast. So we would like to keep it that way. If you're just finding the show, if you've enjoyed so far, if you're following along and you've never done this before, go over to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review, give us a little blurb. You could just say Excelsior. Anything helps. So if you're doing that on the podcast services, it is greatly appreciated. But Jack, where can the people find you?
Sure. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at FascinatedJack. Also on JoyClicks, we have the Pokemon podcast, My First Mon, and you and I are playing through Crystal. And it's a great time. And we have a very active community over there. Loving the comments from them.
Yeah, love the support and the interaction from My First Mon. And I know this is our show too, but I do think there's a world where we can get even more interaction on this show.
Yeah, and I there's a world where we get more interaction. We can get actual tangible interaction with maybe playing with the community. I'm just throwing that out there. We haven't talked about that, but I'm sure there's 2 of us, 2 of you out there who want to play with us. It'd be a good time.
Yeah, and so that's going to do it for this week. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, we're in a lot of places. Check it out if you haven't checked it out. But until next week, Excelsior.
Excelsior.